Gig Gab, episode 429 for Monday, May 13th, National Apple Pie Day 2024. Greetings, folks, and welcome to Gig Gab, the show by, for, and about working musicians here, as usual, in Durham, New Hampshire. I'm Dave Hamilton, and today with me, I have someone, I was going to say that he has done front of house sound for Prince, Tom Petty, Rush, Jackson Browne, and nowadays on the road with Kenny Chesney, and that is all true, but really, he's done front of house sound for all of us here when we go see these shows. Robert Scovill, thank you so much for taking time out of your Kenny Chesney tour schedule to spend it with us here.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure, man. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Nice to hang out here. It's going to be fun. I got a feeling. Although I got to say,
yes,
I'm a cherry pie guy, not an apple pie guy. So
that's okay.
I don't know how this is going to work out, but we'll see.
If that's the biggest problem we have today, we're in great shape.
we need choices in catering. That's all I'm saying.
That's so in addition to this storied career in front of house sound that I want to get into, you're also you worked for Avid for a long time developing the venue line. You're now with EAW, if I understand the news in the industry correctly.
Yeah, that's correct.
And you really are, as the stories are told to me by folks who know you, you're an educator sort of at your core. Whether that's what you're doing in that moment or not, you're sort of always teaching. It seems like yeah.
Yeah, I won't debate that. I mean, and it comes, I think that is driven from a pretty pure place in my heart, if I would put it that way.
Yeah.
You know, from being a young man at a time when this business was still barely even a cottage industry, really trying to learn this stuff. You know, I mean, because as in 1979, 1980, you did not have the resources you have today. And
you didn't have the resources you have today 10 years ago, let alone 30 years ago or 50
right.
years ago. Yeah.
And as we've come to learn, I think over the last 10 or 12 years, at least I hope we've learned this. Maybe having some age on my side here, I can, have a little different context on this than a lot of people. But having all of that information at your disposal is a little bit of a dual-edged sword. Because there's no way to vet the information, right? There's no way to vet the person giving the information to know whether it's valid or not. You know, I mean, my gosh, man. I mean, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole really early here, but we have places on the internet where things are being talked about in professional audio with absolute authority that are 100% wrong, and
hopefully this episode isn't going to be one of them. So
I hope not. For all of you listening, question everything I say today. Yeah,
that's right.
But I was going to say, there's no way to know. Like people talk with, like I say, absolute authority there. And I can relate to this a little bit because I went through a little bit of this as a young man. Your mind is innocent at a point in your career where, you kind of take in things and it's hard to deprogram it. Especially if you start using it and then some point down the road realize, what I'm doing there is not right. That's not right. It's not fundamentally right. And man, it is hard to deprogram that. So I think I have a respect for that especially with young minds. And I've always kind of taken this approach of, if I'm going to teach it to you, you can bet I've done the work on it and I know it. I just refuse to talk about something, a piece of gear, a technique, whatever, unless I feel like I know it inside out. And that's out of respect for whoever might be listening to me. That's where it comes from.
I endeavor to do the same thing here. Occasionally we veer into uncharted water, and thankfully we have an audience of intelligent folks who sends in notes and corrects us. But that's one of the things I love about doing shows like this is that we have this hive mind, we have a community, and we're all here to help each other. So I appreciate you joining for today.
This kind of setting can be really, really effective. I mean, I love this piece of it and love being able to interact with people and chew on a topic or chew on a subject.
Yeah.
But man, there's got to be some integrity in it at some point, and there's got to be some understanding of the topic, and I think what comes with that is the discipline. Maybe I'll even use the word courage here, to be able to say, I don't know. I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe I'll do some research and I'll try to figure it out. But right now I'm not going to tell you I know unless I know.
There's no way for any of us to possess the knowledge of all things, or even in a given field. It's impossible to know all the things, especially now. Yeah. So
yeah. I bristle at this idea and have all of my life, this idea of your truth and my truth. I think that's just absolute hogwash. Look, there are facts, and facts should not be confused with truth. A bunch of facts put together can lead you towards some truth, but facts are not truth, okay? And there's only one truth. There's not your truth. There's not my truth. There's only one truth. How's that for setting the tone for the meeting?
No, I love it. So, folks, you know what you're in for, and it's going to get nerdier from here. I have a feeling.
100%.
Yeah, no, this is great. So I don't even know where I want to take. I was going to sort of start with, what you're doing now, because you're out on the road with Kenny Chesney.
Yep.
I correct me if I'm wrong, but you are A1 front of house sound for this tour. Perhaps some of the biggest audiences, at least on a regular basis, that anyone would do sound for.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's as big from an attendance perspective.
From an attendance perspective. Yeah.
It's as big a tour as you're ever going to want to do. I mean, Saturday night we were in Minneapolis at the Viking Stadium, which is notoriously a very, very difficult room. I mean, it is reverberant city in there, playing to, close to 60,000 people in there, I mean, it'll get your attention. I mean, I know guys have heard me say this for a long time, but it was part of the attraction for me to go do that, is that this is adult audio. Right. I mean, you got to know what you're doing if you want to get a good result here. I mean, you just have to. And I mean that from every stage of it, from, dealing with the stage, dealing with the PA interaction to the room, mixing the show. You better have it wired. Otherwise, it's just going to be a mediocre result,
Yeah.
At best. And in those kind of places, it can be a really sub-mediocre result because the environment is so vicious,
Absolutely. Yeah. So often playing, smaller gigs outdoors is preferred, because you don't have the reflectiveness of ceilings and walls and all of that stuff. You just kind of push it out of the speakers and it's like, you're good to go. That's good for, a couple 100 feet. And then, and then there's what you have to deal with. So walk us through that. When you're going into a stadium like the Viking Stadium, that it's it's going to be a fun challenge of a room. How do you what are the things that you are thinking about as you're going in? How do you approach it? Where are you looking for the problems? What are you doing when you find the problems you weren't looking for? Yeah. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you got to be kind of open to all resources at your disposal, for one. You got to be able to open to all ideas here. But that said, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it way before we ever get there, on a show this size, for sure. I mean, we have the building geometries already in software. We can look at the aiming capabilities of the line sources that we're using. Can we actually reach those pieces of the room? What kind of distance are we trying to throw there? Do we need to incorporate delay there in order to get diction back to that piece of the room? All of those things are in play well before we get there, and decisions are made well before we get there, right?
Yep.
Now, one of the challenges we had on this tour in particular, and I'm going to cop to something here a little bit, was that Kenny wanted to put up much bigger video screens left and right of the stage. Uh-oh. Like, if you've seen some of the pictures of it, and the pictures really don't even do justice to how big these screens are. But my goal was to keep the PA system inside the bay, inside the structure. I didn't want to hang outside the structure
because
front
you
of
didn't
those
want
video
to
screens.
Block views, right?
Right. And plus blocking views. I mean, if you got people sitting 300 feet high in the air looking down on the stage, they're a couple 100 feet above the PA system. So you don't want to make them look through the PA system to see the guy, right? So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to make a commitment to try to keep the PA in the bay here. But what that also means is that the PA is going to be incredibly high off the ground. You got to get above these screens.
Yeah. Oh, so you went above the screens with the
above and behind. above and behind.
Huh.
So, I was very, it was one of those things where I saw the drawings and thought, fellas, you do know we have a PA system on this tour, right? That we need to put up every day, right? Everybody gets that. I mean, we're going to need that piece of the production, right?
With given today's technology, I think that's something that's a necessity. That's right.
You don't want to ever assume they know that. I'm just saying. I've been to some meetings
fair.
where it's like, hey, where are we going to put the PA? Oh, you can set it up over there. It'll be fine. No,
It'll be fine.
No, it will not be fine. Okay. So, so we're having these meetings, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the renderings, because we have, we CAD renderings of the entire stadium, PA screens, everything, where we can actually look at it.
No, it makes sense.
In 3D and get some sense of it. And, I started kind of doing some measurements. I was thinking, okay, man, that means that we're going to have the PA, the bottom of the PA system, nearly 45 feet off the ground. 45
feet. That's high up. Wow.
Oh, that's really high. To give you some context on that, the normal trim height in an arena would probably be in the neighborhood of 25 feet to the bottom of the PA. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, it got my attention because here's the problem. I mean, you want to geek out? Here's the problem.
We love to geek out. Sometimes, and today is one of those times. Yes.
Here's the challenge when you start to get the PA really high, right? Is that you're going to have a front fill system, most likely, right? And the problem is if you have a live stage, if you've got a lot of audio coming off of the stage itself, right? Now the audio from the stage is going to reach the listener before the audio from the PA.
Oh, and you
strictly
don't get
as a result of
just because of distance.
Just because of propagation and distance, right? So there's going to be this place where it breaks down, where you go, we can't go any higher, or we can't cover this front section with anything to do with the PA.
So this is fascinating to me because playing in small clubs, we run into these problems where the audio from the stage is a significant factor in what the people, especially the people close to the stage, hear. And you have to think about this with the PA. I always assumed that once you sort of got to rooms that were big enough or stadiums that were big enough, you didn't have to worry about that as much, but they've created this exact problem again for you on the largest side of it.
Well, I'll kind of push back on something you say there to begin with. That problem is in play regardless of where you play. Oh, if you have a live stage, that problem is in play wherever you play. Because, even in an arena, and, I worked on this for years trying to really refine this when I was working with Tom Petty. Because I wanted that zone down there to be so good. It's like, okay, how do we do it? How do we make it good?
Yeah.
And, part of it was some PA technology that we were using that was allowing us to do this. But to kind of cut to the chase here, part of the way you do it is if you have near field speakers down there for that front fill.
Yep. And these would be speakers sort of across on the front of the stage, across the proscenium.
Which are for the first, 5, maybe 8 rows of people, really, realistically. Yeah. But those are the money seats, right? Those are the seats that really, really need to sound good.
Yep.
Well, the problem down there is that the front fill speakers are not in phase, not in time with the audio coming from the stage if they are aligned to the flown speakers. Well, the competing information down there is the front fill speakers and the stage volume.
That's it. Yeah, the flown speakers are less relevant there, or should be less relevant.
Well, they should be less relevant. But, if we try to cover with those speakers by putting these big J's in the array or whatever, try to cover right down to the front row, they're actually causing the problem down there.
Fascinating.
Right?
Makes perfect sense. Yes, of course. Yeah.
So, what we kind of worked with on Petty, and again, I'll allude to some of the PA usage that we had there, was we created a zone for that first 5 or 8 to 10 rows where the front fill system was a complete reinforcement of the stage, right? Oh. It was treated, you almost can compartmentalize it and think of
mixed
that's
separately.
The 8 to 10 rows, that's their PA system. And it included panning, positioning, everything. Like if you were on the right side of the house and you heard Mike Campbell coming from the left side, your attention was drawn left, not right in front of you, right? So I tried to make it like you were just hearing an incredible back line down there plus a vocal, And we got it. I mean, we got to it over the last couple of tours.
It should be seamless, but in order to make it so that no one knows it's happening, you have to do a lot of work.
Oh yeah, a lot of work. I remember working when we changed over to the EAW adaptive PA, working with those guys because they came out to help us kind of deploy that PA system and get it going.
Sure.
And they were just stunned at how much time I spent during the day tuning for the front fill system. And it was like, well, guys, this has to be right, and then we'll worry about all the rest of it. Because if this isn't right down here, these are the people that Tom's making eye contact with.
Yeah.
These people have to be engaged in the show. They have to be.
For a lot of reasons.
They got to be digging it.
Yep. Yeah. But for the band especially, because if they're being blown out by all they hear is guitar and, snare drum or whatever, that sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. And it does affect it. If those two things aren't in time down there, then a comb filter still takes place, So yeah, I have some technique and some routine for doing that kind of world down there to make it really good. And ironically, we have to do that sort of thing on Kenny Chesney too, because we have this thing called the sandbar down front, which is an entire, 40-foot rectangle down there of people that are only in the near field, because he runs out on the tee, he's out in front of that, and it's kind of party zone down there, so you got to compartmentalize that as well.
All right, so
But
you mentioned you have some technique for this. I think that technique is probably something that a good chunk of our listeners who are playing, smaller rooms, medium-sized rooms, would actually benefit from hearing about, because that is all they need to worry about.
It's kind of this. I don't want to call it unwritten, but it's kind of this thing that it's kind of an elephant in the room when I go in to do small places, of how many people don't really want to address this. Because it's complex and it takes time, and people don't want to spend time. They want to just get the show up and going, and okay, let it be what it's going to be. But if you want to do this really correct, and I'll just preface this by saying, I think smaller rooms are way harder to do than big rooms.
Yeah.
I'll take a stadium. I'll take a hockey arena any day over a medium-sized theater or nightclub.
Yep.
Especially if you got a live stage. It's easier to do them. You can be way more in control of it.
Yes,
way
because
less
the stage,
coloration.
Yeah, the stage has things you can't control from the console anyway. Yeah.
But the flip side of that is you've got to have enough stones to be able to work with that band and get a balanced stage first, and then reinforce that stage through the use of time. Right?
Okay.
And we could never do this in analog. We could only move we might be able to move the PA back and forward a little bit to get time at the back line.
Physically, the speakers, you mean? Yeah.
Well, I mean, in time, we had some digital delay where we could move the time. Right?
Got it. Right.
But in a small club, now that we have digital consoles, you actually have the ability to move the microphone back in time.
Right.
Because remember, an acoustic source is going to propagate to the listener. Well, the microphone has no propagation time.
It's right there. Yeah.
It's right there, and it's coming out of the PA immediately. So if you delay the microphone now, you can delay the snare mic back in time with the snare drum.
Well, of course
Following
you can.
me there?
I totally follow you there. Yeah, because you want that transient to hit synchronously to the listener, as opposed to it comes out of the speaker and then you hear the sound that came off the drum finally hitting you. Yeah.
Now, there is a balance to doing this. Obviously, you want to make the alignment point the place where the snare drum is the loudest acoustically and the loudest coming out of the PA. That's the place where it's going to have the most trouble. So
makes
sense. Want to align those two positions, and then everything else just falls away naturally. Yep. As the volume of one or the other starts to take precedent, the comb filter goes away. Right.
Yep.
So you need to do that. Now, there's a downside to it. As I've preached my entire career, audio is about managing trade-offs. You're never going to get 100% solution. So the problem with that is you're going to make an acoustic environment that's really good. It's going to sound really good acoustically. But if you were to now print that mix coming off the console, it's going to sound disjointed because it's going to have all these
weird
propagation offsets in there. All right, so pick one.
Well, unless you want to run two separate mixes.
But that's difficult to do that on a digital console because the channel delay is going to come so early in the chain. So
you'd almost need to run like splits and have two separate consoles to do that mix.
Well, you got to have a lot of output capability on the console if you really want to do it. So I mean, to kind of let the cat out of the bag on how we were doing it for Petty, is we had matrices driving the front fill that took audio subgroups that I could manipulate time on.
Okay.
In the subgroup.
Okay.
So I wouldn't
right.
necessarily take the entire or the snare drum back, but I would take the entire drum kit.
The drum kit.
Back to
sure.
the drum kit. The entire guitar rig back to the guitar rig. But
it.
it's complex. And
would you do this? Would you let a computer sort of align the delays, or would you do this almost by ear from standing in that mix position?
I would always use the computer to guesstimate it. Or I shouldn't say guesstimate it, to calculate it.
Yep.
I mean, I had some tricks to doing it.
Sure.
And
because you got to do this day in and day out.
Yeah. Well, once you like on the petty thing, the front fill in relation to the back line, that was the same almost every day.
Oh, that's fair. Right.
So that propagation was going to be there every day. The PA interaction with it, that was going to change daily.
Sure.
So yeah, we did that out there, and man, I mean, it sounds like fluffing my own pillow here, but man, down in that zone, it sounded good down there.
I will say, we've talked about this on this show over the 9.5 years we've been doing it. I did not understand why I would like Tom Petty until too late in his career, but I did get to go see him once. I wrote him off as like, oh, it's just some garage band. It's like, well, yeah, but that's the beauty of it. So yeah, anyway, I did get to see him once, and we were fairly close. I would say that we were probably in the 6 to 10 row range, and I was blown away when they came out. How it sounded at first, like it I'm sure it got better from there, but I'm an audio nerd.
Sure.
I go in and I try to set my internal bar low so that I can enjoy the concert, as opposed to moaning internally about why isn't this? And it's just blown away. They opened with "Listen to Her Heart," and it was like every harmony was there. The drums sounded like perfectly mixed drums. Everything. It was fantastic. So yeah,
well, thank you. I hope
you
I was
can toot your own horn, but I'll toot it for you. So yeah.
Well, but again, to kind of reiterate this, because this can be understated at times. That started with the sound that was happening on that stage before there was ever a speaker turned on, and many times to the consternation of the guitar players. Tom Petty was in charge of balancing that stage, and I'll give him credit, man. Times when I would go up on that stage and walk around, I was always kind of mesmerized at how good it sounded on stage. I was like, wow. I mean, no matter where I'm standing up here, I can hear everything going on up here, And it must have just made for this really inspiring environment to play and sing in,
Yeah. So I've always, it drives me nuts when bands don't even know that they could be thinking about making a stage sound good, not just for the stage, but for the house too, right? Like, it's all
because it
part
impacts
of
the house. Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
Of course, but it's like, start with the stage, and if the guitar is 5 times as loud as the snare drum, and the snare drum's 5 times as loud as the guitar, think about that. Like, is this? Yeah. Like, what are you doing to yourselves in the audience here? I preach this all the time, so it makes a difference.
Again, it's going to sound like I'm fluffing here, but again, you've got to have somebody. In that case, it was Tom and me. I think you got to have somebody that has that vision and works toward that goal. I mean, and it has to be somebody that the band respects to say it.
Yep.
But to say, hey, okay, do what you need to do, but you're just way too loud right now for this room.
Yes.
Take care of it however you got to take care of it. Whether it's using a power soak or setting your amp up where you can hear it more ear level. I don't care what it is, but you need to get a more reasonable context of of your volume right now.
Yeah.
And luckily, I had the backing of the blonde guy. He would back on that.
Right.
And
it helps to have buy-in. Right.
Yeah. And I'll say this about that camp. They were not on ears. That was all wedges, backline, etc. The only time Ferroni was ever on ears was if he was going to play to a click track on something.
Okay.
And we got to a period later in Tom's career where he was using one ear and a wedge. He'd kind of do that balance thing where it was diction and kind of the heart of the vocal down there. But I'll tell you, man, it sounded really good. Really good.
Yeah. So do you prefer, I mean, you might not have a preference, but we've been talking about live stages, and what I interpret you mean by that is that there are actual, not only are there live drums on stage, but there are amps on stage. And then of course we have ampless stages, which now are, I don't want to say the norm in even club bands, but it's certainly not uncommon to find a club band where the only thing making noise on stage is the drums. And that gets to be its own, like, that's harder to manage, I think. You get more control, but you have to think a lot about it, especially that, first 5 rows, because it's possible all they're going to hear is drums. Yeah.
Well, it puts more pressure on that front fill scene. Absolutely more, because it's got to do the whole game now. I mean, I went through that with Matchbox 20. Matchbox 20 was a silent stage with the exception of the drums. And, it's like, well, the only thing these people are going to hear is the front fill. So the mix better be sorted out, and it better be in time with the drums, And I tell you that, that whole concept gets sticky too when you got drums that are offset to one side, and then alignment becomes even more of an issue, a little more challenging. So,
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. Because what we'll wind up doing is running a front fill speaker that has amps in it, like more guitars than vocals even. Mm-hmm. And what I've found is, and I didn't think about, until you and I have been having this conversation, I didn't think about why this worked better, but we found that putting that speaker upstage, sort of equal to where the drums are, suddenly made everything sound and feel a little bit better. And it's
just
because
like
of
they
the
did
time.
in the 60s.
Just like they did in the 60s. Yeah, exactly.
You think they did that for no reason? I guarantee you they did it for a reason, whether they knew what they were doing or not.
Right. And it never dawned on me that, this now makes it so that the guitar and the snare drum are hitting the audience at the same time. Even if we're not delaying the vocal, okay, well, fine. Like, that's okay to a degree, depending on how deep the stage actually is, So will you delay when you're... Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'll give you another one that'll bend your mind a little bit. Because again, for audio guys, it's kind of the elephant in the room that we don't necessarily want to address sometimes, but you have to if you want a good result. And where this really shows up for me is on cell phone audio. Okay. And it's this idea that if you cannot get the sources in your room, meaning the stage, the front fill, the PA, the side hangs, all to arrive coherently in the far field, you're now making it sound bad when it reverberates, right? If there's comb filtering in the source that's exciting the reverb response, the footprint of the room now is comb filtered as well.
Makes total sense. Yeah,
right?
Every reflection is coming from the source.
The double source.
Yes,
right.
Or more than one source. Yeah, right.
So you have to pay attention to this, and I really hear it in cell phone video. Like, I can tell if somebody's listening on a cell phone, it's like, PA is not very coherent up there.
Yeah.
That makes sense
that the cell phone would do that because it's got an attenuator in it that will bring volume levels down. You're not hearing as much of the wash, and that makes sense.
I can glean an awful lot of information from a cell phone video, and I'm not scared to watch them on my own tour either.
Sure,
and have actually used them to make a point to people at times of how good this can be if you are paying attention to this sort of stuff. I had a piece of video from the 2022 tour. That we did at Foxborough in Massachusetts at Patriots Stadium.
That's an hour and a half for me. Yeah.
And I was watching this. I just stumbled on it online, and I was watching the video, and I was listening to it, and I was like, "Wow, man, that sounds really coherent." I was like, you're kind of patting yourself on the back, going,
"Sure,
wow, that's really good." And then I just kind of took note of where he was sitting, and I realized he's on the 180-degree line of the stage, meaning he's directly off axis of the stage at the very top of the stadium.
Oh, wow. So looking sort of down
he's looking
on the
way
side
down,
of the stage.
Like he's way above the PA up there.
Yeah.
And looking, crossways at the stage. I was thinking, wow, man, how are you getting that good audio up there? So I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, my name's Robert. I'm blah blah blah." I said, "I need you to please send me this video. Are you mind sending it to me?" So I've kind of archived it, and I took it to my PA guys, that are in charge of putting it up and getting going there. I said, "Guys, nice job." I said, "This is as good as it's going to ever get up there." So
that's
well
great.
done. Well done.
I will have to ask my wife. She is a Chesney fan, and I believe she and our daughter went to that one of those series of shows, because he always does several at the end of the tour.
Yeah, we're doing
in
3
Foxborough.
nights there this year.
Yeah. And she often goes to one of those nights, and I know they went to one of them in 22. So I'll have to see if either one of them has any video from it.
See if he agrees with it. She'll be like, "No, good grief,
No,
the snare
she's
drum
picky.
was all over the place."
Yeah. She's super picky about. I have ruined her. She tells me she used to be able to go and just enjoy live music no matter what, and now she's like, "Oh, the sound's bad," or "Oh gosh, those harmonies are out of tune," or whatever. Like,
my wife's the same way, man.
Yeah.
We go to theater shows or whatever. She's just like, "Shut up! No, I'm in the story right now. Don't do it."
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Don't do it to me.
Shut
Don't
up.
ruin this for me. Yes,
Yep.
that's right. Yeah.
I'm in the moment. Don't mess it up.
Outstanding. You mentioned in-ear monitors. I know you and Brad Maddox know one another. When we had Brad on again recently, I asked him about in-ears, and he's like, "I don't have anything to." He's like, "I love that they exist. That's the beginning and the end of my knowledge about them." So, are you in the same boat when it comes to IEMs, or do you get involved in that too?
Well, certainly, I certainly get involved in it. And
Okay.
Again, I'm going to.
And I don't mean to sell Brad out. Like he.
I don't either. I don't either.
Yeah.
Everybody can have their thing on it.
Yeah.
But my experience with it, because I've obviously been in on them since day one. I remember kind of hybriding together these wacky in-ear systems for early bands. But the thing, you start noticing immediately is that when performers can hear themselves that well, it definitely affects their performance in a positive way. No question. No ifs, ands, or buts about that piece of it.
Okay.
The challenges that come with it that require kind of vision and expertise when you're implementing in-ear monitors is knowing how to not create isolation zones for artists. You've still got to have this idea of ensemble up there. They've still got to be able to hear everybody else as eloquently as they hear themselves and play as ensemble. Otherwise, the thing gets really disjointed in the mix. It just does. I've seen it happen so many times. I've been using
in-ears for, this is my 20th year on in-ears. Now, as a, smaller club musician, that was a disaster to try and figure out 20 years ago. Nowadays, it's a whole lot easier to get an ears mix, especially out of, front of house from some random club somewhere. Back then it was, they were like, "Wait, what do you need?" And so I had to learn to be really polite, of course, kind and efficient with what I asked from the front of house engineer. But that idea of ensemble it's hard. It's not always easy to get with in-ears. It's easy to get isolated. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
The singers are a very interesting version of this, right? And I've really wrestled with this. I actually wrestled with it with Tom for a little while when he was going to his in-ears.
Yep.
Or his in-ear. Is that, again, you can get to the point where you have so much diction and so much ability to hear yourself that you start singing like this.
I was going to ask if you noticed this. Yes, of course you did.
Oh my gosh, of course you did. Because, and you got to be really kind of, I guess careful is the right word, of how you explain this problem to singers. This was an ongoing thing for me with Petty for years, because he was a very quiet singer to begin with. And then when we got to ears, is this idea of that the signal to noise ratio, and I would never use that term even to start with, but we're geeking here. So that signal to noise ratio is dependent upon how loud you sing.
How much signal you give it.
How much signal you give it, because the background noise is fixed.
Yes.
It's fixed in level, right? So if you want
it's
more
often
vocal,
a drum set 5 feet behind you, like
100%.
Yep.
So if you want more vocal in the microphone and less background noise, I either need more vocal or less background noise. There's no magic microphone, no magic plug-in that's going to fix this problem.
Yep.
It's as simple as that.
Owsley Stanley tried to solve it with having the two microphones out of phase. And I mean, that was interesting.
I mean, the idea there was that you're using your back line as
your
monitor.
monitors. Right.
I mean,
right.
There's so many good things about that. It's not even funny, but
crazy.
We won't go there. Let's not go down that rabbit hole today.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But but to say, singers have to be cognizant of that, and how loud am I singing? And the ultimate irony in all this, right, in my mind, is that think about the way vocal production is going these days on records, right? Which is singers in their bedroom singing something very intimate, very up close and personal. Now go try to make this happen in a wildly ambient space for 20,000 people.
Good luck. Good luck. Yeah, I had to learn it because I'm a singing drummer, and so I had the same problem at the first gig.
Wait a minute. You're a singing drummer?
I am.
Okay, we might need to just end the show right there.
I'm sorry.
I don't think I'm allowed to actually speak to you anymore.
What?
I'm sorry.
What's the issue with singing drummers? Dave needs
to ask. It's that you're drumming and singing, and try to get that vocal mic to work.
Right. I have found moving to in-ears. I first learned the exact lesson very quickly that you just articulated, that no matter how I am hearing, I still need to project into, because it's the same microphone and the same PA and the same other instruments on stage and in the club. So that made sense to me once it was pointed out that I started singing more quietly. It was like, right. I got it. Okay, got it.
Well, drummers are another really fascinating study in ear monitors. I can't tell you how many people I've suggested this to, and they've had great results with it. So you can take this and try it if you like.
Sure.
But especially drummers that are playing acoustic drums, right? And I'll speak to this because I started out as a drummer. When you grow up as a drummer, you are building your sound with your technique, right? How hard you play, how hard you hit the snare, how hard you hit the cymbals, everything. And that is an acoustic trigger in your brain when you're playing. Am I playing in blend? Am I playing a good mix? Am I doing all those things? Now, take a pair of ear monitors and put it in a person's ears. How do you think they're going to play? They're naturally going to respond by playing harder.
Yep.
This cuts off all high frequency for all intents and purposes. They're going to play their cymbals harder.
Yep.
Etc. to kind of get back to what they've programmed for 20 years of playing. Right?
I read listeners are sick and tired of me telling this story, but I'll tell it to you.
I've never heard it, so bring it
up. I was, a budding drummer, 14, 15 years old. I read an article in Modern Drummer with Alex Van Halen, and he pointed out that he had lost, at that point in time, 70% of his hearing in one ear, 30% in the other or something. And it was right about the time, I think, that he and Jerry Harvey started sort of concocting what became Ultimate Ears, right?
Okay.
Because he wanted headphones, but he didn't want people to see him with headphones, right? But, but I didn't know about that part of it at that point in time, but it stunned me that he had lost all this hearing. And I also had a part-time job in a pharmacy. And so I have been wearing earplugs since basically the 1 month mark of being a drummer.
Right.
And so moving to in-ears was, from that standpoint, very natural for me because I was already used to not hearing the high end of my drums. In fact, moving to in-ears brought some of that in. It was quite nice.
Well, that plays right to what I suggest to people, especially drummers who may not have done what you had done with earplugs all their life.
Yeah.
But I said, okay, and this is going to sound crazy, but try this. Make the first input you put in somebody's ears, if they're a drummer, the overhead mics.
Bingo.
Right?
Yes. That's where I start today. Yes.
Don't treat them as cymbal mics. They're drum mics.
Yes.
And I suggested even putting something XY or a stereo directly over the drummer's head and make sure it's panned correctly to his ears and start there. And then backfill it with close mics as needed. And you'd be surprised how much more imbalance drummers hit cymbals when that's the first thing that's coming to their ears.
Yes. It makes a huge difference.
Think about the trickle down of that, right?
Yep.
Drummers playing a little quieter, a little more imbalance. Now signal to noise just got better in the vocal mic.
Fair. Yep. Are you a fan of like the plexiglass shields, like especially on cymbals and things like that? No. He's shaking his head no.
please do not put the drums in an aquarium. Please.
Huh. That is not the answer I expected from a front of house engineer.
It destroys the drum sound. Absolutely destroys the drum sound. Now you've got all kinds of first reflections back to your microphones.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
All kinds.
Yeah. How about the cymbal shields? I think
those are just wildly ineffective.
Okay.
So I just don't buy that at all.
Got it. I asked, we just had a guy on last week, Mike Schulte, who plays in a cover band called the Pork Tornadoes. They've built up their marketing and their audience to a point where they're playing gigs for, 5,000 and 10,000 people fairly routinely. And he has found that putting cymbal shields up really does help the bleed into the vocal mics, the bleed of cymbals into the vocal mics. It might change
it. Yeah, I'll grant you that. Okay, sure. If you want to knock down the cymbals a little bit, okay, yeah, sure, all right.
Yeah,
but I'm just overall not a fan of it. But I'll tell you, there are times when I might have to be a fan of it. Okay,
sure.
So like if it's acoustic drums on stage that I have to get turned down because of all the problems they're causing, I may have to resort to it. And I'm going to go way out on the edge here. I'll expect a call from the lawyers here any minute. So this is a challenge, and I kind of picked up on it really early the first time I was ever in the Sphere in Vegas.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's right. They use it in the Sphere. That's right. Yep.
The stage is way out in front of the PA.
Yep.
So the laws of physics say the first thing arriving to the people down front is going to be the stage sound, and there is not a damn thing you can do about it.
And the only sound that at least the two bands that have played there so far, U2 and Fish, have had on stage is drums. It's an ampless stage for both of those bands.
And I didn't know that. And I was actually going to reach out to Gary Brown and go, okay, tell me the real deal.
Yep.
How many live amps did you have on stage?
None.
See, because you can't.
Right, you can't. Right, and John Fishman was in an aquarium.
Yeah.
So which you would have to be. Yeah.
But even with that, right? Like I was there for opening night, and
for you too.
I was really excited to hear this and see what was going on because I had done some walkthroughs of the Sphere before that, and honestly, I had some questions that went unanswered, and I was like, okay, I want to see this. So as luck would have it, I had another friend of mine who was there, who was down close to the stage. He was probably within 2 or 3 bodies of the stage.
Sure.
And I said, please shoot me some cell phone video down there.
Oh, right. Please shoot me the old cell phone video. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Because here we go. Right.
Yep.
I said, I need to know what it sounds like down there. And sure enough, man, he sent me this video. And in terms of, again, we're going to go to geek talk here.
Yeah.
In terms of impulse down there, it was abysmal.
Interesting.
Abysmal.
Makes sense.
Which I knew it was going to be. It was just confirmation of what it was going to be. So, in my pro sphere, I think it's one of the most incredible live experiences I've been a party of. I was just like, wow, this is just incredible. But there is some real challenges, especially for near field audio there. I mean, I don't know how you're going to solve that problem there.
I have not seen a concert at the Sphere. I saw the movie that they show that demos the Sphere. And what dawned on me it took maybe 30 minutes into the movie before I realized what I was experiencing. The screen, as anybody who's been there or even just thinks about this place knows, it's completely...
It's phenomenal.
It's phenomenal. It's amazing. It's something that until you've been in there, you've never seen it before because that's where it exists.
I remember shooting cell phone during the show and just thinking, this isn't going to do this justice.
No, not even close.
Visually,
visually. I do think like that this is a great opportunity for, Apple with the Vision Pro and anybody else with a VR headset, like it with a high quality visual aspect to a VR headset. This might really be the place to do some of that. But what I noticed 30 minutes in, after I'd sort of gotten used to the visual aspect of the Sphere, was how perfectly tuned the sound was for my seat. And I was in, random seat X. It doesn't matter because that place is built to tune the sound perfectly for every seat.
Well, that's kind of the mindset behind beamforming with the holopod, right? Is that you're creating zones of coverage and optimizing it for a given zone very specifically, So,
It was, I was amazed. It was like, wait a minute, I have perfect surround sound sitting here in just some random seat. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I heard that about this place. Like that, they did that for all the
part
seats.
of it.
Yeah,
that part
it's
of
amazing.
It was great. I mean, I kind of did the same thing. Like I said, I went to opening night, and then we stayed around for the opening of the Aronofsky movie on Sunday. I wanted to juxtaposition those two things and see how they were, and certainly I think I walked away from the film thinking, boy, I really wish U2 would have actually spatialized a little more than they did. I mean, it sounded like there were, for the majority of the show, I thought myself, wow, this sounds really mono,
Interesting.
I mean, there was elements of it that exploded out that they did very effectively, but on whole, it was very centered in terms of its mix, which I thought, I wish they would have spread it out a little bit, But hey, that's their call, I mean. But,
I have friends
as a listener, I remember thinking that.
I have friends who were at Fish, and I think Fish was doing a lot more experimentation, like sound and visual experimentation in the moment, as opposed to U2, which was, a scripted show more than Fish was. And people said for the first couple of nights of Fish's 4-night run, they were using the sound was too disparate. It was distracting having sound all over the place all the time. But it sounded like they kind of dialed that in as the run progressed. So
I mean, I've been kind of on this crusade about immersive. Certainly for live music. There's going to be a boundary with it where it breaks down. It's a propagation boundary, right? Where it's going to break down, where it's going to start to change the feel of the music because of the distance you are away from the speakers, right?
Yeah.
But that's not to say, I mean, I've said this countless times now, immersive is the most misused term we have going today. Probably short of maybe unprecedented, which if I hear unprecedented one more time in my life, I'm going to scream.
Well, I like it when people say it's very unique too, because unique seems to be a binary thing. Like, I don't know.
I mean, we could go down a really, really long, deep rabbit hole here if we're not careful. We could be here until Thursday.
So, all right. Let's change gears. We'll go back to this singing drummer thing because I
touched a nerve, did I? Okay, yes. Let's go.
You touched a curiosity, right? Because I am routinely working to make sure that, as best as is possible, my vocal mic picks up more signal than noise, despite it being, 18 to 20 inches away from a snare drum, which can be, depending on how hard I hit that drum, it could be 110 dB, right? Right. So I'm always in search of a vocal mic that A, suits my voice, and then B, has great off-axis rejection. I have been using for quite some time. I stumbled onto the Bob Heil series of microphones, and the PR30 was what I first started using because that's what existed with that sort of. What did he put in it? He and Joe Walsh took something from ham radio.
Yeah, that's right.
And applied it to microphones to give you that off-axis rejection without that hypercardioid peak at 180 degrees. And then he designed the PR31BW for, and I can't remember the sound engineer's name, whose initials are BW, but he wanted it for singing drummers, which is just a short barrel version of the PR30. And I've been using that for a very long time, especially with a right angle XLR connector, and it's great. I never hit the mic with my sticks or anything. And it does fairly well.
Yeah, I was say bravo. You did all the right things there. So yes.
Yeah, but now I'm curious, what microphone would you put on a singing drummer if you had your druthers and the drummer was open to anything, let's say?
This is going to sound like pandering here, but I probably would have made exactly the choice you made.
Well, thank you for pandering to me, Bob.
I mean, either that or get them on a headset. And, the headset thing is a little iffy sometimes for drummers, but, I like it when a drummer can, swing it away and concentrate on their playing and then swing it back in and do it. Long as you can remember to turn off the microphone when it's swung away, then yes, so it doesn't become a third really awful sounding overhead.
Yeah. Right.
So,
right.
But, and I promise you, I'm jesting a little bit with this whole drummer and vocal.
Of course you
Obviously,
are. No, it's
there
great.
are some great examples of vocal, coming from drummers. So.
Obviously, yes. Yeah. I'm not necessarily one of them, mind you, but they
I have
exist
no evidence
out there.
Yeah. I mean, Phil Collins, not
Phil?
bad. He do okay.
Don Henley did all right with his career.
Yeah, he did all right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever worked with either of those artists?
I have not. I have not done
Okay.
any work with the Eagles, nor have I worked with Phil Collins. No.
You got it. Okay. All right. Yeah. I was just curious what drum mics or drum vocal mics you might use in those scenarios. But yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I can remember it just from seeing them in pictures.
Yeah.
I think Phil Collins for a long time was on either Beyer M88 or maybe a Beyer. He might have even been on a Beyer M180 or 160 at one point.
Really?
Ribbon. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
And Henley, I saw Henley singing
Yeah.
into a 57 with a windscreen on it for years and years.
Yeah, it was a 57. I agree. Yeah. Yep. That was the default for a long time for a singing drummer was a 57. Yeah. And it worked fine, but I like what Bob did with those mics. That I am able to sing into that Heil almost like I'm singing into a condenser. I can move back and forth to blend a little bit.
Yeah.
And I like that ability to do that, as opposed to like the Telefunken, the M80 series. Great for that because they've got good off-axis rejection as well. But I feel like I'm singing down a tube. It's weird for me.
Yeah,
so.
and that mic doesn't have even though I'm a big fan of that mic, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
Has a lot of handling noise in it. So I mean, you better have it on a really isolated stand if you're going to swing that in over a drum kit because
That's
there's
fair.
going to be a lot of low mid information come into that handling noise. Unless they've gotten that fixed. I haven't used it in quite a while now.
I think the M81 might have fixed that, but I can't say because I don't use them for that. They do. The M80s sound great as snare drum mics, by the way. I love them as that.
No
Yeah,
question.
Good.
I'll tell you where it works for me. And I think it's the cut down version of it. I don't even know the number of it.
The half size of it. Yeah.
By 100 miles, the best snare bottom mic I've ever used.
Oh.
You'd have to
Really?
wrestle. You'd have to wrestle me to get it off the snare bottom right now.
Interesting. What do you use on the snare top?
Right now, I'm using an SM57.
Okay.
Shocking,
Yeah.
I know.
No.
And I'm trying the Loughton snare mic. I'm giving that a run for its money.
All right.
And
Okay.
I'll say the jury's a little mixed on it right now. I haven't really found the pocket for it yet. It's definitely a very different sounding to the 57. I'll grant you that.
Yep.
But I seem to be able to get a little bit more like fundamental pop out of the Loughton than I get out of the 57. With the 57, I got to generate that a little more.
Got it.
Fabricate it, I should say. But the Loughton, if you want some snare to have some weight to it, that's not a bad choice. But it's very different top end to the 57. Got
it. Have you played with the Earthworks SR117 as a snare mic yet?
I have not because I know the mic.
Yeah.
And I haven't because of the styles of music that I've been working with.
Got it.
I considered using it at one point as kind of doing a dynamic condenser pair on a snare drum.
Yeah.
And ended up going with the DPA to do that instead of the Earthworks. So
Okay.
It was just,
okay. Because I've got the
Earthworks, great microphones.
They
Great
do. I'm on the Ethos Now podcasting, and I swore for years that I would never use anything but a dynamic mic for podcast stuff. And Earthworks said, just try this out. And I put it up and I haven't taken it down, and it's been.
I have one sitting on the shelf in there and was using it pre this microphone that I'm talking in today.
All right, and which microphone are you talking into today while we're nerding
You're gonna
out
ask
on
me
gear?
the model number? Oh God,
I don't know.
It's a Beyer
Yeah.
ribbon.
Okay.
There might be a little mic handling noise here. Hang on.
That's okay. We'll excuse it.
Oh my God, there's not a model number on it. It's so old though. This microphone's probably,
All right.
I don't know, 40 years old.
Yeah.
Hang on. Let me get on the interwebs. Let me go to the Google machine. I bet I can find a.
All right. Well, you can send it to me afterwards. I've got a couple of days. I can put it in the thing. But that's so you're on a ribbon mic there. Okay.
Yeah, this is an old Beyer ribbon.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it. Oh, that's terrible. I don't know numbers. It's that one over there. Give me that one.
The only reason I was able to ask you about the SR117 is because they sent me one to test on vocals, which I have, and I love it, and also on the snare, which I haven't quite yet. But it's the box is sitting right next to me, so I was able to look and see the model number. Yeah.
Cheater.
That's not a cheater. That's being well
cheating.
prepared.
You should be able to just pull those numbers out of your noggin like a good engineer.
The beautiful thing is we have these devices that remember all of this stuff for us. We don't have to remember model numbers anymore.
Man, it's funny you bring that up because I think about, new people coming into this industry today, and I just think, there's no way you're going to know all of these kind of data points. Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, it was like 57, 58, or, sure. It was about 6 micro, RE20 maybe.
Maybe
about
a
6
D112.
microphones to choose
Yeah,
from.
exactly. Yeah.
Can you imagine the catalog of microphones to choose from today? It's just mind blowing.
I mean, I can. We talk about we have a segment that we usually call on the show. You and I just did a little bit of it called Gear Gab, right? And so we talk about gear and all kinds of stuff, and everybody uses different things for different purposes, and it's something we love to nerd out about because it's what we do. But I can begin to imagine, yes, to answer your rhetorical question, the list of things, as I'm sure you can too.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
just mind blowing.
Yeah.
I mean, you would be hard pressed if quizzed to describe all the different 414s that have existed in their life.
Oh no.
And that was this the Teflon capsule. This was the gold capsule. This was that was a really good. No, that didn't work. And
even if you asked me to describe all of the microphones that are not in cases in my studio like in the room with me without looking, I don't know that I could do it.
Right. I could. I mean, I drive people like Claire Brothers. I drive them crazy with this sort of thing. I don't know. It's the one with the silver thing and the. Yeah. Take a picture. Is that it? No, that's not it. That's not it. There's the other model. You need this one,
Yeah. Fun.
Speaking of that, funny we're talking about this. I just switched over, or I'm going to switch over next week to some different overheads on the drum kit. I've been using combination of Tull microphones and a Royer ribbon, like a stereo ribbon, which on the previous tour worked fabulous because they kind of voice the same, even though the Tulls are a condenser, they're kind of a C12E kind of thing. And they just seem to match up really good with the ribbon where, I didn't have these big tonality differences in it. But the drummer, Nick Buta, kind of changed cymbals this year. He went to a different make of cymbals. They definitely have a completely different timbre to them. And it's not working as good. So I was thinking, you know what, I'm going to try. So it's going to give me the opportunity to try some of the new Austrian audio stuff, which is kind of another remake of the 414s and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll, in our next series together, Dave, we'll talk about the success or failure of the Austrian audio microphone.
We'll gear gab on that. That sounds great. Yeah. Very cool. Thank you for spending your time with us. I guess I was going to ask if you had any sort of last minute stories you wanted to tell us. I will share that there has already been a story told on this show that included you. Brad Maddox told the story of you and him joining Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson at a baseball game where Alex had you and Brad and Geddy sign a woman's something for autographs as he had convinced her that you and Brad were some versions of Neil and Alex. So that was you, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it. That sounds just like us. Yes.
Because you did sound for Rush before Brad took over as front of house for them. You moved from Rush to Tom Petty when Rush sort of took many years off.
I mean, it was I mean, Brad was on the tours that I was mixing,
right?
So he was working as one of the PA guys on the tour, and a lot of times he was mixing opening acts, like he mixed Mr. Big out there when they were opening.
That's what he said. Yeah.
So I mean, and then we went through Rush's dark period there, where they were gone for a period of years, and. By the time that came back around, I mean, it honestly, Rush was the gold ring for me. I mean, that was the brass ring tour for me. I had wanted to do that all of my career. So to have to give that up was really, really painful. I still got scars from that,
I wondered why. It was just the timing of it, because they took 5 years off and no one knew if or when they would come back. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, and, I think if you were talking to Ged or Alex, I think they would cop to this idea of, okay, you've got to look out for your family and everything else first. That's got to be the first thing. I mean, Geddy would come at it from the angle of baseball. It's like where you draft somebody and the Yankees come in and offer them a lot of money to take them away. They have to look out for their family and their own interests there.
Absolutely.
I got put in that position.
Yes, of course.
It's one of the, I'm not too ashamed to say it. It's one of the first times I took the money.
Interesting.
It was just like,
you needed to
I'm
work.
sorry. I said it to Ged and Alex. I said, front of house guys, just don't get offered this kind of money, guys. I can't turn this down. I just
and that was to go out with Tom Petty, right?
It was to continue with Tom Petty. Yeah.
To continue with I got you.
Yeah, I had already been with Petty for 4 or 5 years at that point, maybe even longer.
Yeah.
And I mean, as silly as this sounds now in hindsight, you kind of playing the odds a little bit. It's like, well, okay, Rush has been out of it 5-6 years now. We don't know what's going to happen when they come back here. I can't. Do I really? As much as I emotionally, my heart said, take the Rush gig. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
The practical side of me just said, I can't turn this down over here. It's going to change. It's going to change the trajectory of my personal life and here. I can't turn that down. So luckily we've remained cordial, but like I said, it was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking to turn that down.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I think Brad Maddox's first gig as day one as front of house was their first gig back on the Vapor Trails tour.
Yeah. That would have been right.
Yeah. He and I, the first time we met, we sort of shared a moment about it because that happened in Hartford, Connecticut, right near where I was living at the time. So I was at that show, and it was an emotional moment for everyone in the room when they took that stage.
Oh my gosh.
You could see it on their faces on stage. Obviously, everybody in the crowd felt it, and Brad's like, "Oh yeah, we felt it at the front of house console too."
Well, I mean,
of course.
Just use this as an aside of that. I've told this story a few times. When I was out with Rush, I think this was Test for Echo, maybe one tour previous. I can't remember.
Okay.
But I was trying to develop virtual sound check at that point. So, I was recording every night on ADAT out there.
Right.
And nobody was giving that any thought. Management wasn't giving that any thought. It was like, okay, yeah, we'll have these ADATs at the end of whatever you recorded. I don't know. Yes, that'll be great to throw in the archive. Right.
Yeah.
So over the course, technically the recording of it, I would call a failure. I mean, we probably made 60 attempts at a 72 track record of that tour and maybe got 20 complete shows.
Okay.
Just because of the mechanics of the ADAT.
Yeah.
But
the gear wasn't
at the time,
yeah.
Didn't think anything about it. Yeah, here's all the tapes, throw them in the vault, etc. Well, then everything happens with Neil. And now all of a sudden we're looking at those ADAT tapes thinking, those might be the very last Rush recordings ever.
Right.
So now there was a new emphasis on digging those out and trying to mix them, So
whoa,
yeah, it was
right. It makes
about
perfect sense.
Yeah. So I can imagine. Fast forward that up to the first Vapor Trails show, you can only imagine the emotion that would have been at that show. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I'm glad that it just serendipitously I got to be there, as a fan, obviously.
Oh, I was thrilled to see it reemerge. I just thought, okay, thank goodness this is going to come back,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep. Very cool. Anything else to share? Where can people find you if you want people to find you? If you don't, feedback at giggabpodcast.com.
Find me. Interact. I'm usually about 200 feet from the stage, right in the center of the building. Okay, so that's one place you can find me. The other is obviously I'm on Facebook, Robert Scovill.
Got it.
Although I think if you type in the / address for Facebook to get to me, it only has one L in my name.
Oh, no kidding.
To make it worse, to make it more confusing. But
sure,
just search Robert Scovill. You'll figure out which one's me. Instagram, Robert Scovill. LinkedIn, Robert Scovill. I'm not a TikToker as of this moment. So,
all right.
But yeah, I'm always posting stuff up on there. You're welcome to reach out to me. I also have a website. So if you want to go see that, it's robertscovill.com.
Yep.
You can join me in a thing that we have called the Back Lounge, which has just shifted. It's every Monday night now at 4:20 p.m. on Pacific time.
Okay.
Go to my website and sign up for that. It's just literally a Zoom get together where any topic is open to be discussed.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I've gotten your emails on it. I wasn't sure if that was an accident that you put me on that list.
You had to have signed up somehow. So
I don't know that I did, but maybe I did. Or maybe you put me on the list after I emailed you telling you about we had mentioned you on the show with either Brad or Dan East or both or something. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You get a lot of real people, real industry people in there.
Yeah.
We chat on every subject imaginable in there.
Amazing.
So, yeah, it's good.
Cool.
We've been doing it for about 3 years now.
That's cool. Oh, that's cool. Very cool. And you do it like you keep it going even while you're on tour, if you can.
Yeah.
I
try to be there every night. There are some nights where just logistically it doesn't work out.
Obviously.
Okay, we're going to put off till next week. So
Yeah. Of course. That's cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for spending your time with us. I really appreciate it, folks. Feedback at giggabpodcast.com. Of course, if you have any notes for me or the show in general, and of course, I can always pass things along to Robert. And that's where we're at. Yeah.
Thank you, man. Yeah. Thank you for making this happen. I actually really enjoyed this conversation. This was way different than any of the other ones I've ever done. So thank you for making it unprecedented. Unique.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it doesn't remain unique. I'd love to have you back again someday, and it would be great to.
Anytime, my friend.
It's great to have met. Yeah.
Just drop me a line. I'm there. So.
Awesome. Do you maybe have 3 words you might want to share with our audience as we depart here today?
Be nice to your local sound guy. Okay, it's a hard gig. It's hard. Be nice.
Those are good words. Also, always be performing, folks, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Great. Thank you so much for this. So much fun.